What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the One and Gold Talk podcast. I'm joined by your favorite columnist for cleveland.com, Jimmy Watkins. How you doing on this fine Wednesday? Happy Juneteenth to you, Jimmy. How you doing, buddy?
Doing all right. Happy Juneteenth to you, Ethan. We're both working on the holiday, but that's all right. We'll grind through it. We're trying to stay cool, obviously. This is crazy. So I've been in my current apartment for, a little over a year now. And I just learned yesterday that I have air conditioning. It's like...
What? Wait. You've been living without have you had heat at least during the winter?
Yes, had heat, obviously had heat.
It's not obviously, because sometimes the AC unit is connected to the heating unit.
Right. So I'm in like an older house that's been split into different units. And the air conditioning is a window unit that needed to be manually installed. So I just came home. Yep. So basically last summer I was sweating it out, windows open, trying to use the ceiling fans, all that stuff. I was like, man, I got such a great deal in this place, but you can't get what you pay for with that. Then I come home yesterday from the gym, and my landlord's in the driveway. They're always here fixing something up. They're like, how's your AC doing? I'm like, what? They had to show me in this little kitchen, the door sitting right behind me. It's like the closet in my kitchen pantry, I guess. And sure enough, in the corner, there's a little window unit in there. So
no way.
Small victories. It's the small victories.
Yeah, I mean, good Lord. You were probably in the best shape of your life last summer, just sweating it out.
I was dying.
Well, speaking of getting your money's worth, Monty Williams is out as Detroit Pistons head coach. That came out on Wednesday, and we're going to get into the specifics on that and just how important that could be for the Cavs coaching search, because first of all, we know that the Cavs need a guy with experience and need a guy that's been able to lead in different kinds of roles. And we talk about his experience with the Suns. We talk about Monty Williams' experience with the Detroit Pistons. He was in his first year. Your man is making money without having to work. I think that's a dream job. But you also think about the realities of how this could impact the Cavs' coaching search, because we had heard that it could potentially be ending this week or before the draft, with James Borrego and Kenny Atkinson being the front runners for that position. But Jimmy, I want to get your thoughts on what you would think about a head coaching job being filled by Monty Williams on the back end of kind of a blindsided action by the new operations over there in Detroit for Monty.
Yeah, the last 5 years of Monty's career are kind of really tricky, right? Because in Phoenix, he got them to the finals, obviously, but I think a lot of the basketball intelligence public credits Chris Paul, the Chris Paul edition with helping organize that team. That doesn't mean that Monty didn't help that along, but that it's hard to sort credit there. And then it did not end well over there. Monty never got along well with DeAndre Ayton at the very least. I don't again, how much of that is Monty, how much of that is DeAndre Ayton, I couldn't tell you. And they ended their postseason in 2022-23 went very poorly, in part because they traded for Kevin Durant in midseason. He got hurt. And he played, I think, a handful of regular season games before the playoffs began. So they had zero time to gel. And they kind of have a crazy new owner over there. And Matt Ishbia, first time owner, steps in, immediately trades for Kevin Durant. I don't know what to make of his read on the team. I'm sure he probably talked. I would guess he probably talked to Devin Booker and Kevin Durant about firing the coach before he did it, right? But that's a mess. Then Monty, by the way, I believe has won Coach of the Year twice in the NBA. So that we need to his resume is sterling. He's done that. He did it in, I believe, at New Orleans and Phoenix, two very different roster setups. at the same time, it ended very poorly for him in Phoenix, and then he takes over this young Detroit team. They were one of the worst teams of all time, and they entered the season with semi-legitimate play-in aspirations, at least like on their timeline, right? Like they had a group of young players that it seemed like Cade Cunningham entering year 3, Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren entering year 2. They spent a little money on some veterans last offseason. It seemed like they thought they were ready to take another step, but instead they took a huge step backwards. But again, how much of that is on Monty Williams and how much of that is on Troy Weaver, who they demoted in the wake of all this? How much of that is on these young players who are still trying to figure their way in the NBA? I don't know. I say that all to say it's a jumbled mess. Monty's most recent 2 stints are a jumbled mess that are hard to sift through. And honestly, the question for me, I think he's worth a call for sure for the Cavs, given his experience and where he's been in the playoffs, so on and so forth. But does Monty just need a break? Like, does he just need to sit a year out after everything that he's been through over the last 2 years? That would be one of my first questions.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it yesterday, me and Chris on the pod, about how maybe JB Bickerstaff just needed a break from being a coach and might just want to go be a dad and not have to figure out another move to figure out where his family's going to be at. But I definitely think that goes with Monty Williams as well, because you think about his coaching acumen, his coaching resume. He came into the league as a coach with the Portland Trail Blazers as an assistant coach for 5 years, and then he coached the New Orleans Hornets for 5 years, and then he went back to being associate head coach and assistant coach in the next 2 seasons, jumping around 2 different spots with the Oklahoma City Thunder and then the Philadelphia 76ers. Then, as we mentioned, the next year he was with the Phoenix Suns, and then after 4 years there, he was with the Detroit Pistons for a year. So yeah, like, this is a crazy run that Monty Williams went on. And I think, like you said, I think it'll be a player development, player relationship thing more than it would be the X's and O's, because we know that he has the ability to get teams to go places, but we understood that Cade Cunningham wasn't always happy with the situation that he was being put in when it comes to the Detroit Pistons. He was vocal about that as well during his press conferences. So how well would Monty Williams be able to mesh with Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, guys that are got kind of bigger egos and bigger high-profile personalities? And I think that's a different aspect of it than it is the X's and O's and things of that nature. But we know that Donovan Mitchell has signed off on guys like James Borrego, guys that he's been able to talk about and talk to other players around the league. So will this potentially extend the Cavs coaching search? Probably. But as Chris said in yesterday's podcast, the Cavs were already looking to talk to 2, maybe 3 more candidates already. So we're hoping, the Cavs are hoping that this gets done by next week's NBA draft, but that's still up in the air. But Jimmy,
hold on real quick. 2 things real quick before we move on to the fun part of the pod. Number one, I just want to clean up. Monty Williams won the Media Coach of the Year award 1 time with Phoenix. He won the NBCA Coaches Association Coach of the Year award twice, both with the Suns. Just want to clean that up. I think I said he won it with the Suns and the Pelicans earlier. Second thing is, the Monty thing has tentacles that extend beyond the coaching thing, right? You mentioned Borrego and Atkinson. Both of those guys have connections to Trajan Langdon, who is the new boss in Detroit. And now that that's an open coaching job, I mean, I think everyone with a pulse would say that the Cavs job is more appealing from a roster standpoint than the Pistons job. But I don't again, when you have that kind of familiarity with someone, you've worked with them before in a front office, that could play a role here.
I think it would also be like a petty kind of funny moment if the Cavs went and swooped up Monty Williams and were like, hey, you remember Phoenix? You weren't able to get past the NBA Finals with Monty as your coach. we got some beef with you guys. We're gonna take your old coach and go to the NBA Finals and do some work out there. But I think that's a couple years in the making, or depending on what the Cavs do this offseason, it could be the goal for this next season.
Dan Gilbert and Matt Ishbia hate each other too, so that'd be fun.
Yeah, that's the beef that I was alluding to for sure. But we mentioned the NBA draft, and I wanted to have some fun before we get into the picks with Chris and thinking about who the Cavs could go for in this coming up NBA draft. That could be immediate impacts, it could be role players to come. So, with Jimmy today, we're going to go through our top 10 NBA or Cavs draft selections for the past all time, franchise history, everything. And that's what I wanted to talk about with Jimmy. We're going to go through the top 10 that we have, but we're also going to select our starting fives and go back and forth and allow each other to see which one of us will select who and go off of that, but also allowing us to put this into a subtext channel and see who had the better roster or starting five after we get into it. So, first and foremost, we're going to go through our top 10. Jimmy, I'm going to let you go first. I'm going to let you give your top 10 as a list. I think this is the first time I've written down notes in a long time, but we're going to get into it. Let you go first, and then I'll give mine, and then we'll go back and forth with the starting fives when we get there.
All right, so you just want me to run through this. I will go. I mean, I think the first two, I think, are pretty cut and dry. I got LeBron and Kyrie, 1 and 2, and that's the core of the only championship in franchise history. So I don't think very much needs to be said there. Number one, like I thought about quickly, like grading on a curve, their number one picks, and they were both kind of the clear number one pick in their draft, but don't overthink it. That's my 1 and 2. Another number one pick is at number 3 for me, Brad Daugherty, 5-time All-Star, has his jersey, one of the few Cavs that has his jersey in the Raptors. And an underrated thing is that he's the best player in his draft as the number one guy. I did a quick little trip through the 21st century. How often does the number one overall pick end up as the best player in their draft? And I came up with a list of Victor Wembanyama this year. I'm feeling pretty good about that one. You could make a case for Paolo in 2022, but it's a little early because Chet Holmgren and I think Jalen Williams will have something to say about that. 2020, Anthony Edwards, that's 3. 2019, Zion still has a chance, but I would not say he's better than Ja to this point. 2012, Anthony Davis. 2008, again, Derrick Rose or Russell Westbrook. That's a preference thing, I think. Rose went first, and he had a shorter career, so I lean towards that being a no. 2004, Dwight Howard. 2003, LeBron. 2002, Yao Ming by a hair over Amari Stoudemire. I spent way too much time on Basketball Reference last night and this morning. And then the 2000 draft class is kind of a mess. Kenyon Martin went 1, and we have Michael Redd, Hedo Turkoglu, Jamal Crawford, Mike Miller. I don't know what to do with that. So that's 7. 7 times in 24 years. Doesn't happen very often. Brad Daugherty, they can make a pretty easy case. The other contenders in his draft, Mark Price is probably Mark Price and Dennis Rodman, both very strong contenders. And you get into with the Rodman thing, it's like team success versus individual success. Jeff Hornacek, Nate McMillan. You can make that's a hard thing to do, is to nail the number one pick when you have it. So I have Daugherty 3rd, Zydrunas Ilgauskas 4th, another guy who has his number retired, second all time in scoring for the Cavs, and you got him at 20, pretty darn good. Then I would go Terrell Brandon at 5, 2-time All-Star outside of the top 10, 4th all time in assists for the Cavs. Campy Russell, I have at 6, 16, 5 and 3 on 46% shooting. The 8th pick in the 1974 draft, and one of the leaders on the Miracle at Richfield team that made the conference finals in the Cavs' 6th year in existence as a franchise, and that was their claim to fame for a long time. They didn't make another conference finals until I think Braun. I think that's right. So that's what are we 6 in? Now this is where I have Evan Mobley at 7 and Darius Garland at 8 back to back. I know they're both young, but they're both. I think I'm projecting forward a little bit here, and both of them have already accomplished quite a bit for their for how young they are, and particularly with Garland. Garland's actually like a sneaky, kind of a sneaky great pick because Garland only played 5 games in college. There was not a ton of intel on him out there, and the Cavs kind of stuck their neck out there with that pick a little bit. I mean, he went right around where he was supposed to go in that draft, but you never know with the guy who has coming off an injury, and again, you just don't see a lot on him. So I think that's impressive. Then I would go Hot Rod Williams, 7th all time in scoring at the 45th pick. Incredible. Austin Carr, Mr. Cavalier, made an all-star team, also on the Miracle of Richfield team. 16 points per game on 45% shooting during his Cavs tenure. But I docked him a little because he was the number 1 overall pick in his draft. And I don't know, I think when you're making the number 1 pick, most years you expect to get more than one all-star appearance out of it. And then this is hard between 2. I'll go Foots Walker. As a really deep cut. A 3rd round pick. They don't even have 3 rounds anymore, and he's 5th all time in assists for the Cavs. That's pretty great value. Again, he was part of the bench mob on the Miracle of Richfield team. I like to reward the team's success in that regard. I was also thinking of Carlos Boozer. I know he was only here for 2 years, but like you think about, first of all, I think he finished 2nd in most improved player voting his 2nd year, and coincidentally his last year as a Cav. And he became like I think a 3 or 4 time All-Star, made an All-NBA team once. You got him in the 2nd round. That's pretty impressive. I think Carlos Boozer deserves some mention, even though he wasn't here for very long. So that's my list. Bron, Kyrie, Brad Daugherty, Big Z, Terrell Brandon, Campy Russell, Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, Hot Rod Williams, Austin Carr, and Foots Walker.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said you spent too much time on Basketball Reference this morning. That's fantastic. The background details, I could not have planned for you to have all that, but appreciate you, Jimmy. And I had the same 3. Obviously, I think those 3 are pretty solid. LeBron, Kyrie, and Brad Daugherty. And then I kind of jumbled it up because I go based on respect of the organization. I go based on like even after they left, the kind of career that they were able to have, and also just numbers and kind of I made like my own little stat sheet based on their careers. And this was not easy. Like this is a hard list to go through just for draft picks. But I had Austin Carr at my number 4 because of what he means to this organization. 1, he is Mr. Cavalier. You don't get that nickname for being some random dude off the street. Like you have to have a contribution not only to the organization, but also even after. Like he is someone that the people respect and love in the community and all of those good things.
There's a picture of 9-year-old me at a video game store in Willoughby, Ohio, with Austin Carr and the Cavalier girls on my like 10th birthday or something like that. So
you was living life,
making an impact.
I'm trying to figure out if it was Austin Carr or the Cavalier girls, but that's a story for another day, maybe off the pod. For number 5, I actually went with Kevin Johnson. I know Kevin Johnson is someone who is more of a deeper cut for some people, but he's one of the better shooting guards and one of the better players that we've seen from the Cavs. And I just know that some people would have gave me hate if I didn't do my research on some of these guys. And so I'm going to say Kevin Johnson is definitely number 5 for me. I got Carlos Boozer sitting 6. He's a guy that I thought had a career that is memorable even outside of the Cavs. And like you said, his most improved stature is something that people remember from his time with the Cavs, even though he wasn't there for a long time. Then I got Hot Rod Williams. I mean, the guy was a dog. He was able to get after it on a nightly basis. And then I went with Bill Laimbeer at 8, or I don't know what number I'm on. I think it's 8. Yeah. And I mean, because you understand what he came into the league doing. He even went to the Euro League his first season and came back and played even a short stint with the Cavs. But he was someone that I thought could not go without on this list because we want to be clear. These are people that are drafted by the Cavs. Doesn't matter how long they play with them. Doesn't matter any of those things. But we'll get to that a little bit later because I do have a question for you when it comes to this starting 5 group. For number 9, I have Campy Russell. Like you said, everything that had to go into his career and what he brought to the Cavs organization was something that was special. And he's known around the organization still, too. I think he's still a value reporter with them, and that's something that doesn't go unnoticed.
He's also their, I think he's their like alumni director as well. So he's like the glue that connects eras as well. So there's an Austin Carr factor there where you get a legacy award and you were a good player.
Right. 2 things can be true. And then I fought myself on this one because number 10, I have Evan Mobley. And I was kind of doing the same thing you were doing, was projecting forward. I understand that Darius Garland was or has had a better statistical career when it comes to things like that, but you think about Evan Mobley being in the conversation for a defensive player of the year in the first 2 seasons in the league. You think about him being an all-star. You think about what he means for this organization going forward. We have the conversation that Darius Garland could not be here for the next season of the Cleveland Cavaliers. I don't think he has done enough in his first couple of seasons here to be on this top 10 list if he's not going to be here going forward, especially because we don't know what kind of career he's going to have afterwards. Evan Mobley, on the other hand, we know that the Cavs value him and are going to want to keep him, maybe even sign him to a max rookie deal. And knowing that he could be the pinnacle of this organization for the next few years. So that's why I had him at 10. Also, he's just a defensive menace and makes everything difficult on all offenses. And we know that he's growing his 3-point game. And so I think that's enough said. But my sleeper, which is kind of my question for you going into the starting 5 list, is Mark Price was not drafted by the Cavs, but he was a draft day trade. And I mean, he is a guy that most people know as the sharpshooter for the Cavs, one of the best stars that ever come out for the Cavs. That's where my question is. Are we going to say Mark Price is a valuable asset or a choice for this selection, or are we going to leave him off this list?
I mean, I think you and I took different approaches to this a little bit in that I went more like your value to the Cavs, drafted by the Cavs. But like I think if I was including Mark Price on my list, because it's a technicality that he wasn't included on the list because he was a draft day trade, he might be number 1. I know LeBron is LeBron. He's arguably the greatest player of all time. But like they get Mark Price. Was Mark Price drafted 34th, 25th overall? Yeah. Apologies. But like late first round pick, you get a franchise pillar. And by the way, he's kind of when they decided to move off Kevin Johnson, who is one of the best players to not make the Basketball Hall of Fame to this point. Like Mark Price was a big, like they basically, I think the choice at the time, and doing a little research again, was Mark Price or Kevin Johnson. That's kind of like a what if in Cavs history, what could have been. But Mark Price, one of the great, a rare 80s, 90s player who I think is much better suited for this era. One of the greatest shooters of his generation. And there wasn't as much emphasis on the 3-point line, but I think Mark Price today would be shooting about 10 threes and probably scoring 25 points a game. Like he was like 1980s Steve Nash, and even 2005 Steve Nash has said over the years that, man, yeah, I should have been taking way more threes, should have been shooting more jumpers. So I think you could actually make a case, given the draft position, that Mark Price could be the, again, but draft value. You get one of your best players in franchise history late in the first round. So I want to make sure Mark Price gets his due on this podcast from me, because I only left him off the list because of a technicality, and I should have started with that. But yes, he can be involved. He could definitely be involved in our starting five because he'll definitely get picked.
Sounds good. And I know Chris is a big Mark Price guy, so just doing my due diligence and giving that man some shine. But all right, now we're gonna get into the interesting part of it, which is picking starting fives. So that means we cannot have the same player on our team. And the one rule that I gave Jimmy and our subtexters was no LeBron James because he swings almost every conversation if we're really talking about it. So Jimmy, since you are the guest on today's episode, I will let you have the first overall selection of today's starting five draft.
I mean, I'm okay. Twist my arm. I'll take Kyrie Irving. As much respect as I just paid to Mark Price, I think he's a fantastic player. I just think that I've seen Kyrie give me 40 in a finals game, and Mark Price, in part through no fault of his own, he ran into Michael Jordan a couple times. I have not seen that from him, so I'm starting with Kyrie.
I think that's fair, and I think everybody would have done that when you take LeBron off the list. I'm stuck between taking. Okay, let's do this. I'm gonna take Brad Daugherty. It was my first pick. We're gonna go with that. So I'm gonna get my pen out and start crossing off names that I can't use anymore. But go ahead with your second pick.
Snap, give me Mark Price. I'll put them both in the backcourt. Mark Price. I mean, like defensively, we're gonna have some problems
yes.
with our backcourt, but man, you can't leave Mark Price. That's gonna do wonders for Kyrie's driving lanes.
So I think I have to take Kevin Johnson then, if that's what you're gonna do. So I'm gonna go with Kevin Johnson as my point guard.
I do like Kevin Johnson. No one remembers Kevin Johnson as a Cavalier. He was drafted. I understand why he's included in the exercise. It's fair. I just like that doesn't like sing for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a good pick. I'd make that pick too if I were you. But well, okay. I need someone to guard Brad Daugherty, so I'm taking Evan Mobley.
Okay.
I mean, we're playing modern basketball out here, and again, I have two smaller, undersized guards, so I need someone to protect them on defense. Give me Evan Mobley.
I'm gonna go with Carlos Boozer if you're gonna do that.
Ooh, okay. Give me a second here.
Take your time. I'm crossing names off. I had two different starting fives picked out just for this.
Okay. All right, let's get weird. We're going a little. Our team's gonna look a little bit like the JB Bickerstaff Cavs. I'm taking Big Z. Give me two big guys back there.
Okay.
Z can at least space the floor a little bit, so we don't have to have two guys, standing on each other's territory in the paint. But I don't know. I don't love Z's pick and roll defense in space, admittedly, but we'll play drop.
You got Evan Mobley roaming in the backfield. That's what he likes to do anyway. So that's fair. I like that pick. Well, I got Booz and I got Brad. So now I think I need some shooting, and I'm stuck between Austin Carr and Ron Harper. And I think I'm gonna go with Ron Harper.
So we're allowed to pick guys that weren't in our top 10?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. In that case, I mean, again, I've taken every player I've picked besides Mark Price I think even Mark Price's career extended into my existence a little bit. I don't mean to disrespect the old guard. You know what? I did plenty of ranking the old guard in my top 10. So I'm going to cheat really hard, and I'm going to take Andrew Wiggins.
Oh, my God.
I'm going to take Andrew Wiggins.
So I knew this was going to happen. I knew this was going to happen. Because as soon as I put Mark Price on the table, I was like, I should have took Andrew Wiggins, but I didn't know if you were going to just take him because of that conversation.
I mean, I desperately need a modern wing, like more than anything right now. All I have are two dudes who are barely 6 feet tall and then two giants behind them. So honestly, Andrew Wiggins, it's honestly a good thing that he got brought up anyways, because like, I think that's a fun wild card pick for the top 10 just because of what happened afterwards, right? Like,
right.
Maybe Andrew Wiggins could have, LeBron and Kyrie could have had the same amazing moments against the Warriors in the finals. Maybe Andrew Wiggins is a completely different basketball player if he stays with the Cavs and becomes a very productive 3-and-D wing, which he was for about 5 minutes in the Warriors last title run. I don't know what happened to him since then. But I think it's like that's an important draft pick because he appealed enough to Minnesota to get the third piece of the Cavs championship team. Like if the Cavs, I have a feeling that the Cavs knew who Minnesota wanted, particularly if they had any idea that LeBron was on his way. So there's a lot of pulling strings ahead of time. But if no Andrew Wiggins, maybe no Kevin Love. I don't know.
I mean, it's funny because I feel like Andrew Wiggins is like the opposite of what we were doing with Mark Price, because he was a draft and trade away kind of thing. Right. So I'm gonna let you have it.
He fits my roster. He fits my roster. That's all I know. I'm
gonna let you have it for the game.
You also need to remember like how high, like Andrew Wiggins when he came out in the draft, like he was supposed to be the next capital G guy.
Oh yeah,
like there's so much hype on him coming out of the draft. Him and Jabari Parker, who unfortunately got hurt a lot in his career, didn't work out for him. But yeah, Andrew Wiggins is a wild card pick for sure. I cheated. You picked Kevin Johnson, so I don't feel bad.
That's okay. I mean, Kevin. Anyway, I'm gonna take Campy Russell as my small forward, and that'll be my fifth player. So I've got Kevin Johnson, Ron Harper, Campy Russell, Carlos Boozer, and Brad Daugherty.
Darius Garland, undrafted free agent. How about that?
I mean, hey.
So you got, say your team again.
I got Kevin Johnson, Ron Harper, Campy Russell, Carlos Boozer, and Brad Daugherty.
Okay. And I have Kyrie Irving, Mark Price, Andrew Wiggins, Evan Mobley, and Big Z. I'm posting you guys up. You got some small guys down there.
I mean, hey, Booze can bang. But
Big Z shoot right over him. I guess maybe he guards Mobley.
Brad. Isn't Brad 7 foot?
Right. I guess Daugherty guards Z, and then you put Booze on Mobley, and you test Mobley in the post a little bit. It's a fun matchup.
We've seen what Evan Mobley deals with when he got a stronger defender on her, even if it's a little bit smaller. I mean, the Celtics threw Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown at him.
Fair enough.
So we're gonna see. I think this is a good little matchup. Let me see. I'm gonna definitely send this out to the subtexters and see who they got. So just text me your full lineup, and we'll send that out and maybe put it into a poll to see what the subtexters think. But this was a fun exercise, and we got to go in depth on these different players that the Cavs have drafted, and this shows you that there are a lot of different things that can happen on draft night. There's drafts and trades. You got things like free agent signings in the offseason. All of these guys have played some kind of part in the Cavs organization, whether it was Andrew Wiggins being traded to get Kevin Love, whether it was Evan Mobley being one of the best picks of the recent draft classes, or you talk about LeBron James, who has been one of the best players of all time. So the Cavs have done some decent things when it comes to draft night. They have also made some mistakes, but we'll get to see next week what happens, and we'll also get to start talking about who we think the Cavs will be pursuing in this year's draft. But with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris and me by subscribing to Subtext. So if you want to yell at us and tell us that we didn't have the right lineups or we didn't have the right top 10, this is where you can do it. Sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around, because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me and Chris. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.